Thank you for joining today's webinar. I hope everyone had a chance to join the room now. So welcome to the application webinar for HADeS, High Assurance Detection Systems 2026 competition, which launched on the 14th of May. Can we go to the next slide, please? So warm welcome from myself, and today you will also meet our colleagues from the Department for Transport, Paul Redfern, who heads the capability and innovation for the DFT, and Kate Kahn, principal scientist for DSTL threat detection delivery team, and Alex Landy, innovation funding consultant, who will be working closely with the cohort. Next slide, please. Connected Places Catapult is delivering HADeS 2026 program for the Department for Transport. And for those of you who may not know who we are an accelerator for innovation, part of the UK network of 9 different catapults, which lead technology development and innovation across 4 different locations in different sectors. We are all private and non-profit organizations focused on different sectors. And in the case of Connected Places Catapult, we major on clean transport, construction, and data infrastructure. Next slide, please. Today at the webinar, I will hand over to Paul Redfern, who will talk to you about the sector challenges and background for the competition, and Kate will be joining in that presentation. They will then be followed by Alex Lamley, who will talk through the practicalities of the arrangement for the funding call and the application process. And we will have plenty of time for the question and answer session at the end. As you listen to the speakers, you won't be able to unmute yourself, but you can please add questions into the Q&A section of this call. You can also use the chat function if you want to, but please bear in mind that the panel of speakers will be looking at the Q&A. So use that appropriately. You can set also the privacy level of that question if you want to address it to a specific panel member or all the panel members. And I will hand over to Paul. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Julia, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Paul Redfern. I work in the National Security Science and Research Division at the Department for Transport, and I am the lead for capabilities and innovation, which essentially means looking at what our current capability is, what our current capability needs to be, and how we get there. We have a relatively large research department in the Department for Transport, looking at kind of closer to market changes to regulation, standards, and how we get to and how we work with industry to meet those standards. And my job's looking at that slightly longer term piece around where we want to be in the next few years after that. So thank you for joining today. I see there's a whole range of people on the call. Some people I know, some people I don't. So thank you very much for joining, and I hope that what we can do give you today will be useful in deciding whether this is a competition that you are interested in working with us. Next slide, please. So aviation is an area where there's been a lot of change over the past few years in terms of what we asked for in security, and that was driven by a number of incidents that took place. Thankfully, not in the last couple of years. So, but drove what we want to do in the threat picture. So going all the way back to the 80s and 90s, driven by hijacks with weapons, etc. And then there was a spate of incidents around the early 2000s, some of which are shown here, So the Richard Reed shoe bomb, 2001, liquid bomb plot in 2006, Abdul Muttalib, the underpants bomber, in 2009, drove us really to look at what our current capability was at the time and where it wanted to be. And the thing that we saw there was that we were dealing with a lot of the threats in aviation security, so pretty well, but we were seeing threat actors changing what they were doing based and how they wanted to threaten aviation based on what their perception and the reality of the security system was. And we saw a move towards, as I say here, a growing threat to more homemade and improvised explosives, precursors that were going through the system that could be then put together afterwards, and real complex concealment strategies. So those really easy kind of bombs and weapons of somebody just taking something through in a bag. The perception and the reality was that would be very difficult for somebody to do, and so it drove the threat actors to try and be more complex in the way that they would either use materials, put those materials together, conceal those materials. And we've seen that what we've managed to do in the early mid-2000s was, with technology on concepts of operation that we put in place, changed how we saw people reacting to that in terms of threat actors. And we've got a system at the moment where, thankfully, we haven't had many obvious attempts on the aviation system for a while, probably since the early 2010s. There's not been any real high-profile threats against aviation, and that speaks to what we've managed to do over the last few years, last couple of decades, really, in growing our capability. But what we're really cognizant of is that threat is going to keep changing. We need agility in how we deal with that, and we need to innovate in the short and long term as to how we can deal with what we see as the threats coming in the next wave of complexity and things we were expecting. Next slide, please. So from that, I just wanted to give a little idea for people who may not be as au fait with the system around where we are now in terms of aviation security system. And I'm going to talk about the cabin baggage system mostly, but I'll touch on other parts of the system as well. So the current cabin baggage approach is we have a generally two-stage approach. We have primary detection, your bags, etc. I'm going to talk about bags mainly, but I'll talk about people as well in a second. But bags go through a primary system. Usually that's a computer tomography system, a CT system, but some in UK airports, this UK outbound, also we have some airports that still use dual view X-ray systems. Every bag goes through that system, and we don't in the UK have a risk-based system that changes based on what happens to you in your bag based on who you are, where you're flying, etc. Everybody goes through the same level of screening, and we maintain that to make sure that we can establish that everybody gets the same level of screening, and we know what level of screening that is. So all bags go through a primary detection system, usually a CT system, but for some of our smaller airports, it still can be a dual view system, a dual view X-ray system. And then if something in that bag flags, it's sent for secondary or alarm resolution. Now, typically that's an explosive trace detection machine, but if you're used to flying, you'll know that liquids are sent to a different system. So we have a binary system, if it's something that's a liquid, it goes through a liquid explosive detection system, and if it's if it's a solid or not a liquid, it will go through an ETD system along with hand search. So bags are hand searched at the same time. And we're happy with that. It detects a wide range of threats. It gives us operationally viable false alarm rates. And that's a really important thing for us is whatever system we put in place, it's got to be operational, it's got to work. If we're shutting down airports because we're having lots and lots of false alarms, it's very hard to get through the system. It detracts passengers from wanting to travel, then we're doing the terrorist job for them by making a system that just doesn't work. So we balance detection and operational viability with all the things we put in place. So where we are now is we have we've implemented what was called at the time probably wrongly because we're past that now, but Next Generation Security Checkpoint, NGSC in the UK. And that's a number of things. It's the use of CT machines at primary, algorithms on those CT machines, security scanners or body scanners to screen people and screen bodies, and the requirement that all airports over a certain number of passenger movements must deploy this minimum level capability, which is at most of our large airports now. The vast majority of our airports run NGSC, which is a CT machine, 100% body scanners, 100% CT, and that gives us a really good platform to build from because these machines are really capable in what they do at the primary screening. But it therefore gives us the ability to enhance this over time because there's capability within those machines and in the system that we can build on. We've got a system that works, planes are flying, we're finding threats, we have good compliance metrics. But what we'd like to do is a number of things. We'd like to reduce the operator burden on the system that we have, reduce the false alarms, which is we're allied with that. And crucially, we'd like to implement additional standards for explosives and other threats over time. So the machines at the moment are certified to particular standards. They're accredited, tested and accredited to those standards. What we want to do is increase the capability of those standards, include more materials, more concealments, and do that in a way that's operationally viable. Next slide, please. So as I said, we want to really adapt to meet the evolving threat picture. There are things that we know we still can't find as well as we'd like, and we'd like the system to find those. There's an ambition to detect more threat materials, so more types of materials than a lot of that's explosives, but other things like more additional chemical materials, biological type materials, weapons, etc. And we know that there are some concealments we still find challenging from a detection and operational perspective. So we'd like to increase the amounts of concealments, which increases the complexity of finding those things. We'd also like to include a wider range of liquids and screening of liquids, and quite crucially, a number of inorganic materials. So explosives are generally, a lot of the explosives we historically found were organic explosives. There are a range of inorganic explosives that we do find, but we'd like to increase our capability against those inorganic explosives at the primary and secondary. But the implications of that, the more things we look for, the harder it is to do, and the operational effect of that with false alarm rates is likely to go up with the system we have now. So we need to maintain that operational viability, and one of the main issues that we've got is the current alarm resolution technology. So explosive surge detection is great at some of those materials for resolving, but we know it's never going to find some of those. The equipment we currently use is never going to find some of those materials. That means that we have a very specific need on the resolution techniques to find a wider range of the materials that we're finding in the primary, but we don't want to limit this call to just saying we'd like to have a better resolution technique at the end. We want to look at the whole system and say, could we make changes to the system as a whole, whereby the primary works in a different way, the secondary works in a different way, or how they interact with each other works better to either do those key things we're after, increased detection, or increased operational capability, lower false alarm rates, or better experience for the passenger or for the officers who are doing the screening. All of this needs to fit in within international detection requirements. So there is a group called the Technology Alignment Group, which is multinational, including the UK and other countries around the world, looking at what those standards should be, developing the standards and the current and future standards, and the testing methodologies and accreditation for that. We want to be able to deploy additional higher tech standards over time to move us beyond our current next generation security checkpoint baseline. And we're developing the certification for that at the moment. Really what this call is looking to do is to say, if we deployed those standards within the next 3 to 5 years, could the system cope with that? Could the primary cope with that? And there's an accreditation route with that. Could the secondary resolution techniques cope with that? Or is there a way that we could change the whole system to say that we do it in a different way, or that we can have systems that meet those standards, which will give us an operationally viable technique. I guess the question for many people on this call will be, well, what exactly are those standards? What is it you're looking for, the absolute materials? What is it you can find now? What is it you can't find? I'm not in a position on this open call to talk about exactly what those standards are and where our requirements are against those standards. But I think we're going to go into later in the call about some drop-in sessions where we can talk to people individually around ideas, whether things are in scope, what materials could be detected by certain techniques, or by doing things in different ways. So people on this call will be at slightly different understanding levels of what those standards are. So some people will be security cleared, have access to those standards through working on similar calls or through other methods, and will have an idea of what those standards are going to be. Others may be coming to this quite cold and not have an idea at all of what those standards will be. All I'll say on this call, first of all, is there are different ways that we can approach that. We can work with people who have security clearances in the UK to have access to those standards. And we can talk broadly with people on an individual basis around the things we would like to be able to detect. What we'd like to do is be driven a little bit by what you think you can do, and give you an indication of whether that's in scope. So if you've got an idea at the moment, but you don't know whether it's in scope, Alex is going to talk in a minute around the opportunities we've got for one-to-one conversations. We can work with you at your current kind of level of understanding to give you an indication on a one-to-one basis of exactly what it is we're looking at, because people are all different levels of that. But yeah, essentially what we're trying to do is have an idea of whether we can implement these standards with these materials and these concealments and these detection values, etc., in the next 3 to 5 years, and whether that's going to be feasible and whether we can do anything through this innovation call to allow that to happen. Next slide, please. So we're in a bit of a catch-22 situation where we would like to improve those material coverage. And what that will do will, we need all three things on this diagram here to work at the, to be able to give us the optimum system. So if you look at the bottom there, we're looking at increased automation and facilitation. So there are numerous things that we've been looking at over the last few years around automating the system, making it easier for operators, helping those operators of the system, helping those operators decide whether a threat's there, getting people through the system quicker, managing the way that we do that through automation. But we've been quite clear from the department that to be able to add that automation in and take the human out of the system, we want to move to these higher standards where we're automatically detecting a broader range of materials and concealments. Where we are at the moment is we know that the current system, the resolution, so picture of HADeS from what is it, the Disney film Hercules, just to illustrate this call. We need an improved secondary alarm or total system approach to be able to implement those materials on that the left-hand side is showing. So to get the better materials on the left there, we need to know that we can resolve them or have a better system approach to do that, and that will lead for us unlock the way to automate. But we can't automate until we've got better materials coverage, and we can't get better materials coverage until we've got a better resolution across the whole system. And we can't do that at the moment because we haven't got any automation. All of these three things are kind of working against each other for us to say we've got the optimum system. What we're hoping to do from the HADeS call is to start unlocking that with the ideas that people like yourselves have. So we can talk to you about the problems that we have in one-to-ones, but we're really open to, in this call, to any way of unlocking that and looking at the system as a whole to be able to resolve a wider range of threats. So whatever ideas you have are probably in scope of that at the moment. And if not, we can talk to you about what that might mean. But we've been fairly wide in what we can expect in this call, and we're open to numerous different ways. There's in the bid documentation and the technical annex, we've alluded to a certain number of things. but we've tried to be as wide as possible so that we're not narrowing right down into very specific kind of approaches. So do come and talk to us at the one-to-ones if you think that you have something that fits into that. We try to be as wide as possible, so hopefully whatever it is you're thinking you might be able to work with us on should be able to fit within here. Next slide, please. So we've got some focus areas. As I mentioned, we're primarily around detection. This is a detection problem, but really we're interested as well in interoperability of that primary system and the alarm resolution system. So if it's how the primary system talks to the secondary system, what information it gives to it, whether we can dispense with having a primary and secondary and just have one system, whatever you think might be useful there, it's probably in scope. So can we detect things? But can we do that? How might we do that utilizing the current system or something that's different? Or how could we optimize that system? The system's there at the moment. It might be that you're thinking you don't want to put different technology or to change that, but there might be an optimization of how that works and how that works with passengers, with screeners, with automation, etc. We're open to anything about how it might be a better optimization. We're looking primarily at solutions that screen cabin bags and their contents or items to vest into tray. So bags in a tray, things that come out of a passenger's pockets in a tray, things that might come out of a bag into a tray. So trays and bags are the primary thing we're looking at. But we're open in this call if we get ideas in that are really good ideas that are wider than that. We're open to funding within this call as well. So that might be passengers and their belongings, so screening a person, their shoes, their clothes, things they're carrying, etc., are in scope. And also screening of whole baggage and cargo. Well, whilst they're not primarily what we're looking, if we get good ideas into this call, we're interested. And crucially, if there are ideas that fit across multiples there. So if it's something that can deal with cabin baggage, but it could also work well in whole baggage, we're not kind of stuck on, well, we'd have to show it working in cabin baggage and then whole baggage is secondary. We could do it the other way around. If something works for multiple areas, we could prove it in whole baggage and say that has applicability to cabin baggage, etc. So the wider your idea is in terms of where it might give us benefit, the more likely it is to find an approach. Although we are primarily looking at cabin baggage, but we're open to all these other areas as well. Next slide, please. So, and again, in terms of the where we're aiming for in terms of the level of readiness of ideas, we had a previous call in 2025. We had some really good projects. We were quite prescriptive in those projects with a number of tracks around the TRL or technology readiness level. And I think we restricted a little bit where people thought they could put into different tracks. So we tried to be a little bit more open this time. So we've got a track one, which is emerging security innovations. And really that's all around the feasibility of an idea. So it can be an early stage idea, something that long-term could offer capability in the future. As I said, we are looking at 3 to 5 years, but if there are things that might take longer than that, they can sit in this track. And we're looking around the 2 to 3 TRL level for this track, but we're not going to be very prescriptive on that. That's just to give people an idea of generally where we're aiming, but we're not going to be looking at something going, well, that's not 2 to 3 TRL 2 to 3, so it doesn't live there. We'll be very open around where it might be, and so we'll be interested in where you think your ideas are, and crucially what they're going to need to get to an operational level. That's the more important thing. How you think your idea might move over time, not really trying to prove where it is right now. And then we've got evolving security innovations, our track 2. Can it reliably work in a real setting? So that might be a number of things: retrofitting, enhancing the currently deployed technologies, or something completely different, but something a bit higher technology readiness level, where in the next 3 to 5 years we could be showing that it has applicability for our system. And I think next slide, please. Don't think I've got much more. No, I think that's it from me. Happy to take questions later, and we do have a technical information document that is available which gives more information on the current system, and how the current system works and the regulatory approach, etc. But as I said, we've got one-to-one sessions that we're happy to speak to people individually. And I think Alex is going to now cover some of those routes and how you might get in touch with us and ask specific questions. But thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Paul. So you've heard the why. I'm going to take you through the how you do these applications. So this will include the funding that's available, what type of funding it is, who can apply, the timeline, and give you some hints about what a strong application might look like. I'll go reasonably quickly just so we can protect your time for any additional questions. Next slide, please. So eligibility. The headline is that this is open to organizations of any size, private companies, universities, like academic institutions and third sector. But there are a few conditions you need to be aware of. So we do welcome consortia, the lead applicant must be UK registered. Funding that we provide is only ever released to the lead organisation. So if you do form a consortium as a lead applicant, it is your responsibility to share the funding accordingly. Consortia are welcome and genuinely encouraged. So if you're a technology developer, having an airport or an equipment manufacturer alongside you is a real strength because it shows a route into operation, but it is absolutely not necessary, particularly in the proof of concept rather than pre-demonstrator track. International partners are eligible as long as the lead is UK registered. However, it's worth noting that international partners can only receive a maximum of 50% of the total grant. And also in terms of the funding requirements, you can expect a little bit of travel to meetings and events during the project. We haven't yet delineated exactly how much that will be, but it will be relatively minimal. So two things worth flagging that aren't on this slide. First is that, as you said, private organizations, including large organizations, can apply. But if you are a large organization that applies, you'll need to give us a clear rationale for why the work can't be funded from your own internal R&D budget. And secondly, if you submit more than one application, which is allowed, you'll need to show us that you can deliver them concurrently. And on consortia, as I said, if you are the lead, just to double emphasize, it's your responsibility to distribute the funding to the partners. And your application needs to clearly set out each partner's role on your project. Next slide, please. So here are the key dates. We're at the webinar today on the 28th of May. And we have, as Paul mentioned, two drop-in sessions. One is on the 2nd of June and on the 11th of June, both at 11 AM, which I'll come back to a bit later. And to confirm, the hard deadline for applications for this call is 5 PM on the 19th of June. Just want to be really clear on that one, that late submissions will not be considered, so please don't leave it to the last hour. So if you have any questions, please do get in touch with us as soon as you can. If you have any questions or queries, just so we can really try and get everything submitted and cleared away before we get to that deadline. After the applications close, technical assessments run through late June and July, with interviews with shortlisted applicants to begin on the 20th of July, running through to the 6th of August. Now, obviously, this is during the summer holidays, so just to keep in mind that if you are successful at that first technical assessment stage, you will be invited to an interview within those dates. There may be a little bit of flex on that, but not much. So please ensure you try and keep your diaries as free as possible. And we expect final funding decisions towards the end of August. We aim for projects to start on the 1st of September, and then they must be completed by the end of February 2027, so a maximum of 6 months delivery window. If you wish to have a shorter window, that's okay, but we do advise you try and use the maximum time available. Next slide, please. So if you are successful and you get onboarded onto the HADeS 2026 projects, here is what the program will look like. So it starts with a business needs assessment. This will help us to tailor the support that we wrap around you, which will address what you actually need, not just what we think you might need ahead of time. You'll also have regular monthly check-ins with the Department for Transport technical teams. That's Paul and Kate and a few others. This will consist of monthly one-to-one technical sessions, and will be where you can discuss any technical concerns, queries, and regulatory questions with the team. On the CPC side, we will also have a short monthly monitoring form so that we can track your progress and identify any potential issues before they become problems and resolve them. At the end, you'll then complete a final report using a template that we provide you. And to emphasize, it's a supported program. The technical one-to-ones with DFT are a real benefit, and this is going from feedback that we've had with from the previous HADeS competition. It's not just a reporting burden, it is a genuine asset to the development of your solutions. Next slide, please. So on to the money. So there is a total of £500,000 in total split across the two tracks. So track 1, Emerging Security Innovations, Proof of Concept, is up to £40,000. As we mentioned previously, the question you're looking to answer for this track is this idea feasible? For track 2, Evolving Security Innovations, Pre-Demonstrators, it's up to £75,000. And the question you're answering here is, can we make it work reliably in a test setting? So this grant funding is up to 100% under minimum financial assistance. So match funding is not required, but if you do want to contribute match funding, make sure that you record it in your budget template. And funding can cover personnel costs, equipment, R&D, prototyping, consultancy, travel and subsistence and materials. Payments are staged, 6% at the start and 40% upon completion once your final reporting is done. A few practical points on costs. So as you can see there, only costs incurred between the project start and end dates are eligible, nothing before, nothing after. And on MFA, specifically minimum financial assistance, you have to make sure that you have not received, this will not take you above the minimum £315,000 of public support across the current and previous 2 financial years. If you're unsure about that, please do let us know. We can do a double check for you because you'll be asked as part of the process to declare any other public state aid that you've had in that window. So, but keep in mind, this does also include things like subsidised consultancy. It's not just crash grants. So it's worth checking your position early if you're not sure. Next slide, please. So how to actually apply? Well, first, we would strongly recommend that you read the application guidance on our opportunity page. It's the definitive document and it's worth reading properly and in full. You can apply via the link on that opportunity page, which will take you to our application platform and the application form. The form itself is structured that you have some personal information that you provide, the information around your business, due diligence, and then 9 questions about your innovation. We will also ask you for a project plan, a risk register and a finance plan, of which templates are all provided for you. If you need any support or you're not sure about anything or any questions about how to fill things in, please do get in touch with us with the email there on the screen. There are some things that can really make a difference to a good or a bad application. Keep in mind, only information in your application form is assessed. I know that sounds silly to say that, but it is genuinely something worth considering. Don't attach any extra documents, brochures or appendices, not that you can on this form, but don't try and send us anything by email. We will not look at it. We only consider what is in the application form itself, unless we've specifically asked for it. The second key point I would say is make sure that you write in plain English and try and avoid jargon and acronyms. Some of the assessors will be technically strong, but some will be from a broader range of security and technology areas, commercial areas. They may not know your particular niche. So make sure you spell things out and make sure you stick to the word counts. There's nothing wrong with being concise. If you can say something in 10 words rather than 50, please do so. It helps to assess properly because overrunning doesn't help. And one last bit as well. If your project needs access to government furnished assets or information, such as test materials, facilities data, classified information, flag that in the application in the relevant box on question and tell us whether it's essential or just desirable and how you'd mitigate it if you weren't able to get access to that. Next slide, please. So your application is scored against 4 criteria. So the first and largest is solution, which is at 40%. This outlines your fit to the track, your maturity level, how innovative and differentiated your technical approach is, and your understanding of the market. Impact is 30%, and in this section, it really cares about the operational realities and the impacts that your solution will have on things like the false alarm rate, operator burden, running costs, space, infrastructure, and the checkpoint, health and safety, etc. Really, what security benefit your solution delivers. Project management is at 20%. This includes things like financial viability, value for money, credible project plan with milestones, dependencies, and a proper risk register with realistic mitigations. And finally, team is at 10%. So this is making sure that you outline that your team has the right skills, experience, and clear consortium roles and where they fit into your project if you're applying as part of consortium. So next slide, please. Actually, I'm done on that one. The drop-in sessions. If you've got questions after today, we're running 2 drop-in sessions on the 2nd and 11th of June, as I previously mentioned. You can register via the QR code on the screen, and you will also be sent a link in the follow-up email after this webinar. There are a more informal chance to ask anything about the competition or your application. And of course, throughout, you can always email the team as well on the email address that was shared previously. Just as a quick accessibility note, if you need any reasonable adjustments to access or complete your applications, please try and let us know at least 10 days before the deadline so we can put adequate support in place. And as Paul mentioned, you can use these as a space to discuss what kind of additional information you need. And we can use these to schedule potential one-to-ones with the DFT team if there are any questions that can't be answered either in this webinar or in the one-to-one sessions, such as things that cover potentially more official sensitive topics. And finally, before I wrap up, a few practical tips. These come straight from what our assessors tell us. Sorry, apologies, next slide. What makes an application easy to score well. So I know I mentioned previously around keeping to word limits and being concise. Make sure you answer the question directly. Each question is there for a reason, so responds to what's actually being asked and back it up. So feel free to use examples, evidence, or your technical expertise rather than simple assertion. Specific beats vague every time. Second, and this is an important one, as I said, just to reiterate, it's only information in your application form that's assessed. So don't rely on referring to outside information that's not available in the form. And actually, one of the big things I would say is make sure you plan realistically. And by that, what we mean is make sure that you're open about risks and gaps. If you don't know something, perhaps your project is a way to figure that out. Be honest about that. We would rather see an honest, credible plan than one that's potentially over-polished or vague. And just make sure that you're trying to align your solution to the right application maturity level. So as I said, with track 1, is this idea feasible? And for pre-demonstrator, track 2, it's can you make it work reliably in a test setting? Matching your maturity level to the right track is one of the simplest ways to strengthen your application. And as I say, the best tip I can give you is that if you're unsure about anything, we'd rather have a conversation early rather than having you spend time on an application that isn't a good fit. However, just to note on that is that when it comes to what's within or without or out of scope, we will not be. We would if you give us an idea of what the generalities of your application will be, such as if it's a feasibility study, etc. We can tell you if it's general activities within scope, but we will not look at applications and give you a specific recommendation whether something is in or out of scope, if that makes sense. And if you have any questions of that, obviously I have to take any later. And I think that is it for me. So I will hand over back to actually Paul and Kate for the next slide. Actually, I think I'm supposed to say this. So after the end of the competition, there are some next steps that DFT will be looking at potentially. So they're looking when the competition ends and the outcomes are all finalized in their final reports, they will consider opportunities to take them further. So potential activities that might follow on from HADeS are things like additional research, possible policy opportunities, the possible supporting future trials. They will look to integrate solutions from HADeS into the Aviation Security Innovation Program cluster. If you have any questions about that, please do feel free to pop them in the chat at the Q&A function, and potentially future engagement with manufacturers to support the development of funded solutions from a manufacturing perspective. And I think that's it from me now. We are now going into the Q&A section. So what I'll do is I will look at the questions if anyone has any. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions that you would like to ask, and we'll come to them as they come in. Okay, so going into the Q&A section, I can see there are some questions from Dave. How do you define the less than 50% spent outside the UK? As an example, if as a UK company, I need to buy a part from a UK company, but that part is made outside the UK, would that count as part of the UK share? Yes, that would count as part of the UK share if you're purchasing from a UK company. Why is the 20% in the UK and HADeS been increased to 50%? What I can say is that's a change in policy in recommendations from the DFT team in terms of what we can spend inside and outside the UK. That's why that's changed. We have just to also highlight questions that have already been answered by Kate. You've previously worked with DFT through 25 call. Are you able to submit a proposal? If you've already submitted a proposal for the last HADeS competition, are you able to submit that same innovation? Yes, you can submit that same innovation again if you wish. However, I would keep in mind that maybe look at the application, consider if it can be improved, just to increase your chances of getting through for HADeS 2026. Are there any other questions that anyone has? Or we all covered it so well that that everyone's speechless? Dave, I can see you've got your hand up. I'll just allow your mic. There you go. So you can mute yourself now, Dave.
Yes, sorry, didn't want to be mute. Just a very quick one. Paul's talking about one-to-ones. Your session on the 2nd and 11th, are they literally one-to-ones, or is it a restricted number of people at the same time? Because there may be sensitive things we want to discuss truly on the one-to-one.
So those drop-in sessions, it will be anyone can drop in. You will have the chance for a bit of a one-to-one chat. Obviously, it does depend a little bit on numbers, but typically there's not that many people that join, so it is a chance for a one-to-one. If there's anything that can't then be answered in that kind of semi-public forum, because those won't be recorded, so they won't be shared anywhere, unlike this webinar, then we can schedule a specific one-to-one between you and the DC team if they think it will be useful.
Thank you.
Okay. Are letters of support valuable? That's from Carlos Rodriguez. If you are working with a consortium partner and you're relying them for a significant chunk of your work, for example, then yes, it would indicate that you have a strong team within you. So yes, that would count in your favor if in that particular circumstance. If it's, say, for example, someone who is just saying that your technology is good, but they're not supporting and you're not relying on them, it probably would have less impact, I would say, just because we will be judging it based on the content of the application rather than any letters of support that's just purely about the solution. Another question from Jens. Is the detection of narcotics in addition to explosives of interest at all? I think that's one for Paul and Kate.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I would say narcotics on its own, no, but what you've said there in addition to explosives, the more capability you can show by a technique, the better. So if you can say it finds the things, it finds core things, it also finds X, Y, Z extra, then that's positive. So just list whatever capability you think you might be able to get from a technique, and the wider the capability, the better.
Carly, I see you've had your hand up. I will allow your mic. There you go. You should be able to mute yourself now.
Hello. Hi. I'm not sure I explained myself very well in the question I asked there. We have previously worked, and we've worked on a project. So we submitted a proposal, and we've worked with you to develop a system for detection. So my question was, can we submit a proposal around that work that we've already done with the DFT to develop that further? Or are you just looking for completely new innovations on this, so completely new ideas?
I'm happy to take that, Paul. Okay. Yes, so if it's building on existing work that you've already done, that's absolutely fine. What we'd probably benefit from is outlining exactly what you've done in the previous one and highlighting how there's no duplication and that it's genuinely building on what's already done. That is what I would reckon, because that would be a question that the assessors would have: is how is it different from what you've already done, or how is it not duplicating funding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Question from Tom Hardiman. He has the impression that we would be more interested in screening technology. Would we consider innovations about improving the screener performance, i.e. the human in the loop?
So I'll jump in on that one. I think the answer is yes, it's in scope, unless Kate wants to jump on and tell me that we specifically said it's not in the program documentation. Then anything that will improve the system is in scope, and we're very interested in. It would just be up to you in your bid to explain to us exactly where that fits into the system and what the benefit would be. So don't assume that just saying we would make the screener better will allow us to kind of get an idea of what you're after. It's in scope, unless Kate says no. because some things we did go back. It is right. Some things we did go back and forth on, but we'd be interested in just in an application like that. Just concentrate on showing us exactly where the benefits would be, and it's therefore in scope.
Yeah, so it's definitely in scope if it's something that's going to improve detection on specific threats or potentially reduce false alarms, then it would definitely be within scope.
So we have another question from John. Can we better define what a controlled or simulated environment is for track 2? I'm happy to take a crack at that, unless, Kate Paul, you have any strong opinions? Okay, so essentially, in terms of controlled or simulated environment, the simplest way to say with something that's not a live environment would be kind of our best definition. As I said previously, with the maturity levels, we're keeping things a little bit looser, not being too overly prescriptive. So as long as it's not clearly a live environment, I think you should be fine in that respect. So typically, I think we would think it's like in a lab environment. So testing it in a situation where you can control most of the variables. You're not having members of the public trying out the machine or using it, or you don't know there's random things going. That kind of thing. Unless you're using like some kind of double blind thing within a lab, then you wouldn't know. But that's I guess how we would define it. Hopefully that answers your question. Carlos Rodriguez, how should the project costs be justified? Just to clarify, are you meaning in terms of the application budget document, in terms of I want to spend X amount on, say, labor or subcontracting? Can I just confirm that that's what you mean? I'm just trying to find your profile so I can unmute you. There you go. Okay, so I've allowed your mic, so if you would like to clarify on that. Or if you want to add it in the chat, that's fine. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, hello. No, I mean after the project, if the costs are justified technically by milestones or by invoice.
Oh, they're justified by invoice. So at the end of the program, we will ask for evidence for any spend that's not labor cost. So consultancy, lab costs, materials, testing, that kind of thing, other costs. We will ask for evidence through invoices and receipts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Alex, there's a question in the chat around IP as well.
Intellectual property. So as this is a grant, and what I will say is that first is that all IP is governed by grant terms and conditions, which are available on the opportunity page. It is my understanding that any IP generated is owned by the organization that creates it through our grant processes. However, I would refer you for full clarity into the grant terms and conditions. So I don't take that as a final answer. Julia.
Only to say that I added to the chat the link to the documentation. So if anyone else would like to verify IP ownership, you can find the privacy clause and terms and conditions with full details of confirming that. Because the question is also about the application process. So if you are bidding and may not be successful, it's still, you're sharing obviously confidential ideas. So be assured, but you can verify it through the documents in the chat.
Yeah. Do we have any further questions? About 12 minutes left for scheduled time.
There is a question about narcotics.
Was that the one from Jens? Jens, let me just unmute yourself. There you go. You can now mute yourself, Jens.
Yeah, so I think the one regarding narcotics you've already answered, or Paul has answered, so that's fine. Another question. So did I get that right? That, I mean, in the last HADeS call, there was 80% allowed on international contributors. Now it's only 50%. Is there any reasoning behind that?
Yes, there is reason for that. I will pass you over to Paul just to confirm that.
Yeah, and thanks. It was the same question from Dave in the chat earlier as well. I think, well, this has just been a condition that's been put on us by our commercial department. We would like to be able to extend a larger amount, but we've been told that we can't do that. So it's not something we've done on purpose because we want to limit. It's been something that our commercial department have told us we can't do. So apologies, and I realise that for some potential bidders, this is a bit of an issue, but we've not been able to go any higher than that amount within the constraints that we've been told.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, I think we have one in the chat. So a question, would we provide facilities for testing in real scenarios? I think I can probably answer this one, and the answer is no. We're not looking for testing in real scenarios, only simulated and controlled environments at the highest level in terms of the pre-demonstrator application track. But even then, we wouldn't support in providing those kind of facilities. We are simply we provide technical guidance during the progression of your project, provided you're successful. But we want to be able to do any kind of support on physical locations to do this kind of testing. A question from Noel Cummings. Does DFT have a standard test kit for the items divested on the tray that we could utilize? Hand over to Paul and Kate.
We don't have a standard test kit because I think it would be depending on the approach and the technology we're interested in. It might be different. What we do have is bag sets that we use for testing and accreditation. So we do have access to kind of standardized trays. And so I'd say if you feel that you need that as part of a test procedure in the project, then put that in your GFA section that you'd need access to that, and we can look at that. And we do have access to things. I think I understand your question of, is there a standardized kind of set of trays? If that's the question, yes, there is, but I would just put the requirement for that in your GFA section, and then we can assess that depending on what you need. Just be specific about what you'd want access to.
Tim, I'm just going to allow your mic so you can ask your question. That's Tim Sheldon, just to clarify. So you should be able to mute yourself now.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So supposing you do one of the, your project gets accepted and you do it and the result is successful, what happens next?
So, are you meaning in terms of after the project's finished, or once it's accepted, what do you do at that stage?
At the end of your project, you put in a report that says, yes, we managed to do what we said. Then what happens?
I think I'll let Paul take that one.
Yeah, no, and I think the slide that Alex threw up last was around kind of what next. We tried to be not prescriptive because it's really going to depend on where projects get to in TRL, if it's a track 1, if it's a track 2. We are envisaging that there may be or there's likely to be in the future further funding rounds for projects that need further funding to take forward. What we've not decided, what we can't commit to at the moment is those future rounds and where we would be targeting them, whether it's kind of development at the same level, higher TRL development. But what we really want to do is we want these ideas to move on to be useful in a real environment. So we would look at the projects that we funded, look at where they get to, and then we're intending to look at a path for taking them forward depending on what they need. Now, for some projects, that might be more funding, and we would look at that if that's an option. For some of them, it would be access to operators and to live environments, and we would look at how we would go about doing that. But we haven't confirmed exactly what is needed until we know what innovations we're taking forward. The overarching thing would be we would want to move on and work with you to get to an operational situation, but each project will need different support to be able to do that. And as we work through this year, we will build up what that support might be for the future. But we're not intending to say, thanks very much. You finished your project, now it's up to you. We would intend to look at what a targeted support system could look like for each project.
Because I just say that, just comment that 40 or 75,000 pounds and 6 months to do it. That's a very small project,
Yep.
and you're not going to get very far, particularly considering that the problems you're asking people to address are things that have failed to be solved in the last 40 years. So I'm just questioning how much anyone's going to get, going to achieve with those levels, particularly if there's no kind of plan yet for further funding later on.
There's no confirmed plan at the moment.
No.
Understood. We get that, and that's what we'll look at. What happens next in terms of where we get and what ideas we get from this funding round, as to where we go next with that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Unless we have run out. Give another 10 seconds for anyone to raise their hand. Going once, going twice. Okay, in that case, I think we can finish the webinar there. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We hope to see lots of wonderful, interesting applications to the HADeS competition 26, and look forward to speaking to lots of you later, either the drop-ins or seeing your applications come through. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.